Welcome back to the All Turtles podcast, a show about the future of work, the future of health, and entrepreneurs building the future with technology like AI. I'm John Cifuentes, co-founder of All Turtles. Today, Phil Libin, All Turtles CEO, is interviewing Dave Smith. Dave is the head of partnerships at Unreasonable Group, and he and Phil have a discussion how they're working to solve intractable problems.
We've got Dave Smith with us. Dave is the head of creative partnerships at Unreasonable Group, which is a really cool name. Hey, Dave.
Hey, great to meet you.
So let's start with Unreasonable Group. Other than something with a really cool name, what is it?
Great question. So Unreasonable Group is an organization that's built to drive resources to and break down barriers for entrepreneurs that are solving the hardest problems of our time. We're an organization about 10 years old, based out of Boulder, Colorado, and we run a global suite of programs and bring together mentors, specialists, access to finance and capital to help entrepreneurs kind of at a growth stage in their trajectory continue to grow and scale and solve problems faster.
What's unreasonable about it?
I think a lot of things in particular, but the name itself comes from a quote from an Irish playwright, George Bernard Shaw, who said, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in adapting the world to himself, and therefore all progress depends on the unreasonable person. So in our minds, those people who are most unreasonable in the world are entrepreneurs who, where other people see market failures, where other people see big problems, entrepreneurs see dollar signs, they see market opportunities, and they kind of have an impatience about them that causes them to be unable to live in the status quo and to try to bend history in the right direction.
What do you think it is about that mindset that makes some people kind of do this, right? Rather than trying to fit into to the world as it is, try to envision the world as it should be and then make it.
I think with the entrepreneurs we work with, they exist in the problem they're trying to solve, and then they know that they can bring a solution to the table that is new, that's unique, that uses technology to scale, and that can really eradicate the problem from the face of the earth. And they kind of can't help but wield those technologies in a way that is bringing a better world to the communities that they're trying to serve.
And maybe having that awareness of who they're trying to serve, like how important do you think that is? How often do you see that versus like an actual clear focus on, okay, here's the people, here's the community that I'm trying to serve, whose lives I'm trying to improve. How often is it that, or how often is it, here are the dollar signs, here's how I think we can make money?
I don't think those are mutually exclusive at all. I think that's why we like to work with for-profit businesses at Unreasonable Group, because the entrepreneurs that we tend to work with are, in my opinion, returning to like the fundamental basis of capitalism, which is how do we solve problems for people, and then how do we solve the same problem for more people, and then how do we use capital to scale those solutions. So I think that the lived experience and the problem they're trying to solve is definitely a key component to what makes a great entrepreneur. But at the same time, not being afraid of scale, not being afraid of monetizing a solution if it means that you can reach more people and have greater impact.
Yeah, I'm reminded of this article that Christopher Hitchens wrote a while ago, maybe like 10 years ago. He wrote an op-ed of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was this well-known, I guess what used to be Soviet dissident and writer, and he kind of took some weird paths later on in life, but wrote some of the really some of the most prominent works that kind of challenged the thinking in the Soviet Union back when it was at its worst. And Christopher Hitchens' point was that he lived as if, like he basically lived as if he was living in the country that he wanted, as if he was living in the world that he wanted. So he like refused to not write his criticism as if he were living in a country where it was okay to criticize things, as if he was living in a place that had, human dignity, even though he clearly wasn't, even though it wasn't okay and it was going to be like serious consequences. It was this like refusal to bow to the world as it actually was and really just kind of have this, I think what, people said of Steve Jobs later as a reality distortion field around, no, we can you could behave as if the world is the way that you want it to be, that it should be. And usually that's crazy, but sometimes it's effective. And maybe it's a required ingredient to be effective for the kinds of projects that you guys are working at Unreasonable Group.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite Russian authors, by the way, I'm glad somebody else has read his work, But I think it's absolutely necessary to have that kind of warped perspective about the world where, as we said earlier, other people see failures. Entrepreneurs tend to see opportunities. And I think it's the impatience about them as well that causes them to say that this can't wait 10 years, this can't wait 50 years. These solutions exist, and we should bring them to the people that they need to serve.
So Megan Miller, who had a company, Bitty Foods, that was I think in Unreasonable Group.
Yeah.
And she's now actually at Old Turtle. She's head of marketing and comms for us. I'm a big fan of Megan. What was it about kind of her companies or companies like that makes you want to partner with them? And like, what other stuff are you working on?
Oh, definitely. Great question. So in all of the companies that we bring into our program, we look for a common thread, which is one that problem is using a unique technology or using a unique mindset to solve a big problem in the world. With Megan and Bitty Foods, obviously, nutrition needs and agricultural needs and the impact that agriculture is having on the planet are three things that we kind of have to balance in order to survive as a species. And I think what Megan was looking for was a commercially viable way to fundamentally change the way that human beings eat, the way that we get our protein, the way that we snack, the way that we do so many things that are kind of day-to-day for us that if we continue to go down the road we are, they're going to be destructive. But to do them in a way that's more sustainable, that uses less water, that kind of creates a symbiotic relationship between us and the planet, I think Megan brought something incredibly unique to the table with that company, and love the work that she did there. The other things we look for in companies that we bring into our fellowship are we look for solutions that are scalable. So not regionally specific, not isolated to a certain area on the planet, but solutions that we think can grow and scale. And as Muhammad Yunus would put it, to put these problems in a museum. We do work with for-profit companies at Unreasonable. We think that market-based solutions are some of our most effective levers in impacting social change. And then we look for, we look very closely at the entrepreneur, whether or not we think that they are the right person to be leading that company, whether or not their values aligned, whether or not, they wake up every day living and breathing that company, whether they wake up every day living and breathing that problem set. And if they can go to sleep before that thing is solved, then we might be looking at the wrong person. But those are the common threads we see in a lot of the entrepreneurs we bring through our programs. Right now, Unreasonable is running roughly 5 programs a year where we bring roughly 10 to 16 entrepreneurs per program through. We are working across the green economy with a program called Unreasonable Impact that's co-created with Barclays. We are looking at kind of the intersection of the future of youth and the future of technology and the future of work in a program called Unreasonable Future, bringing together the Fossil Foundation, Pearson, and Accenture. And then we are running a program annually called Unreasonable Goals that's looking across all 17 sustainable development goals, bringing together one entrepreneur that kind of represents each of those goals and then finding the right partnerships to support them. So currently we're running those programs, and we're kind of vertically agnostic as an organization. We'll work across any problem set as long as it's impacting, 1 billion lives or so, and as long as we think that entrepreneurs are bringing forward solutions that can help address those problems.
Yeah, this really resonates with me, and it feels kind of philosophically compatible with what we're trying to do at All Turtles. We think of it as trying to tackle the problems that are the monsters hiding in plain sight. Like, these are the things that everyone kind of knows is a massive problem, and when you explain it, no one really disagrees. And yet, for some reason, the world hasn't picked up its collective pitchforks to run after it. Probably because maybe we've just been conditioned that these things are unsolvable. But there's a lot of these things where it's just we're clearly doing something very wrong, and there's no serious disagreement, and there are some potentially obvious solutions or potentially not obvious solutions.
There's a lot of that bystander effect kind of stuff going on where everyone thinks that someone else needs to be the first person to pick up their pitchfork before you do or something similar. But what we've learned a lot in working with a lot of these entrepreneurs is there's no they. There's no they will solve these problems. It's definitely on us.
I kind of call it the no adults realization. It's like most people, I think, at some point, like usually in college, you kind of have this realization where like, but before that, when you're a kid, you kind of think that these magical things called adults and they know what they're doing and it's going to be okay. And then at some point you're like, no, there aren't. There are no adults. It's just us.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm the adult.
And yeah, I think it's like useful to have more and more people have that realization, but maybe not enough do.
Absolutely agree.
There was this product that I saw, it was like served up to me on some social media feed yesterday or 2 days ago or something. And it was literally like, I could not imagine how you could change this product to make me want it less. It was like the absolute dumbest thing I've ever seen. It was like a levitating New England Patriots football and like Bluetooth speaker or something. It was literally that. I will like find it and put it in the show notes. And it was so like, I was so galled at this thing. The fact that someone had made it, right? The fact that like probably a fair number of reasonably talented people, because, this is like, I'm sure the football isn't levitating with magic. There's probably like, magnets or something involved and it's a Bluetooth speaker and there was like some design. So like a bunch of people who were like relatively talented and well-educated wasted all of that to make a goddamn plastic floating football Bluetooth speaker and like slap football team logo on it. And it just felt like, yeah, that's like everything that's wrong with a certain type of entrepreneurship where something else, like having these people spend those resources working on like an actual problem, would have probably made them more money because I don't think they're going to sell too many of those things because they're really idiotic.
Oh, I hope not. I mean, I live in Denver when I'm not up in Vancouver, so I'm a Broncos fan. So the more Patriots gear that gets sold, the worse my life is, obviously.
They had a Broncos version as well. I think they did have them personalized. I had to pick which one I was going to complain about, and I chose to complain about the Patriots one. But what are some of these like monsters hiding in plain sight that you're seeing? Like, I guess another way is like, what are some of the big problems that you think are actually obvious when you point them out that people ought to be chasing after or running at right now?
Man, there are so many, and it's hard to pick where to start. But personally, the ones that I'm kind of most attached to, I would say, are amongst the fact that I think roughly 2 billion people live day to day without connection to the internet, which is, in my opinion, the most fundamental piece of technology that human beings have developed in the last 100 years. The ability to instantaneously connect people with all of human knowledge throughout history and with each other, and to make asynchronous communication and to make all of these things possible. I think the internet at this point is a fundamental basic human right. I think the fact that 2 billion people every day wake up without access to clean water, that 757 million adults in the world are unable to read and write, that, I mean, pick one of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are so many problems that exist within each and every one of them. But I think the monster hiding in plain sight for me is the fact of how interconnected all of these problems are. And that once you start to unravel one, you really start to unpack how deep these things go. And that if you can start to provide water and sanitation to communities, that the rates of education go up, that the rates of literacy go up. If you start to increase the amount of education, the issues of gender equality are often lessened in communities like that. If you start to work on infrastructure and innovation, if you start to bring roads and you start to bring transportation and things like that into cities, that, again, education and access to water and access to other basic human needs increases as well. So I think isolating those problems into silos is one of those things that's the monster hiding in plain sight to me, where if we could really start to build webs of interconnectedness between those, we'll start to see that the solutions that impact one impact the other, and then we can start to work together in a more collaborative sense on them.
So capitalism and this kind of approach of doing this for profit in the market is like it's gotten kind of a bad rap in the past few years in the US, in the kind of the popular imagination, and not entirely unjustified. I have had jobs where the word capitalist was literally in my title. I believe in capitalism. I also kind of believe in socialism. I think the two things are actually talking about two different problems and like advanced societies know how to combine them correctly. But this like for-profit market-based approach to making innovative things seems to have been like the way that most progress has been made in the world in terms of innovative things. But it's also been the way that's a lot of damage has been caused, especially in the past kind of couple of decades. Where do you think that tipping point is? Like what tips something over from, okay, we're using for-profit, free market capitalist things to actually solve important problems and improve people's lives? And then when does it tip over to, okay, this is, rent-seeking, and it's actually hurting everyone who isn't directly benefiting from it?
It's a great question. And I'll preface this by saying that these are my personal beliefs, and they aren't directly the beliefs of everybody that works in Unreasonable, obviously. But not
a single person agrees with me who works here. So that's
that's perfect then. Kindred spirits. I think that a lot of it has been that we're distracted from actually what capitalism is meant to do, which is to solve problems. Capitalism was a device designed to illustrate the fact that problems between people are often similar, that if I have a problem, that other people probably have the same problem, and to incentivize people to solve that problem at scale. So anytime that you're looking at a problem set that impacts multiple people, that impacts, at this point in history, billions of people, capitalism is probably the necessary device to solve that problem at scale, because you're kind of reliant on market efficiencies and those kinds of levers to make sure that is solved at a rate that's efficient, and to make sure that it's not a system that just defeats itself. So what I think the problem is with capital is, or where the problems with capitalism start forming, is kind of the Milton Friedman view of economics, where shareholder value becomes the most important thing rather than actually solving the problem you set out to solve. So as soon as you're making short-term decisions that are great for a smaller group of people and are not utilitarian and serving the community that you're directly starting or trying to impact, I think that's where capitalism starts to break down and fail. I think that there's also a divide between incentives, between what should be capitalist and what should not be. For instance, privatized prisons are a great example of this, where the incentive alignment for a company that's making money off of prisons is to have more people in prison. And the incentive for a criminal justice system is to reform people who are going to prison, to make them an active, reformed part of society. So I think the incentive alignment is also where a part of this breaks down. So I think the combination of those two things is kind of like where that tipping point is, somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, I think that key, that second thing is really key. It's really something that I've been trying to get my head around for a couple of decades now, of how do you just make sure that we can completely eliminate structural misalignment of interest? Like, how do we make sure in everything that we build, invest, work on, whatever, that interests are fundamentally aligned, not structurally misaligned? Because it feels like the structural misalignments, that's where capitalism becomes potentially something that's very dangerous. Because once you're sort of narrowly optimizing something that isn't for the benefit of the wider community, it's a very effective way to screw a lot of people. And the private prison complex is a great example. Like, I personally can't imagine how you could align those incentives.
I don't think you can with capitalism. I think that's, again, like, I know socialism's a dirty word in the States. I don't think it is as much here in Canada at the moment, but there are certain things where the interest of capitalism does not align with the interest of that endeavor. So I think that those, in my opinion, there are aspects of healthcare that fall under that. There are aspects of, there's a reason that a lot of municipal water services aren't privatized, because access to clean drinking water is seen as a fundamental basic human right.
We used to have that in the U.S. That used to totally be a thing. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the healthcare is like an interesting example. We do a bunch of work in healthcare and kind of future of health. And the way I kind of see it is like, capitalism is good for things where you need a lot of innovation. It's like an effective way to incent people to really innovate stuff, do crazy things. And so do you need innovation in healthcare? Yeah, totally. You totally need all sorts of like really innovative, crazy new things being invented all the time. So yeah, capitalism is great for healthcare. Do you need innovation in the way that you pay for healthcare? Not really. You don't need to innovate health insurance too much. Like, there's like a mathematical best that you can possibly do, which is just have as many people as possible in the pool and share the risk out. And like, any innovation on the insurance market is really like getting away from what's mathematically optimal. So like, it seems like, yeah, we should have all sorts of market-based solutions for the actual like interventions and treatments and technologies and drugs and procedures and everything. But like, there ought to not really be that much of a market-based thing for the insurance because, again, I can't see how you would align those incentives correctly.
Absolutely. Could not agree with that more. And I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of innovation in not only the devices and the pharmaceutical treatments and things like that, but how people are accessing healthcare. We have a company out of India that we've put through our program called 1MG. In India, there was a huge corruption problem in the way that healthcare and health services were delivered, specifically in pharmaceuticals, where depending on what doctor you went to and depending on what health clinic you went to, they were kind of in the pocket of various pharmaceutical companies, and they would prescribe you one drug over another or over a generic based on, which pharmaceutical company they were working with, which was directly, adversely aligned with a patient because they were paying more for those same pharmaceuticals. So 1MG just kind of made a public database of this is the pill, this is its generic, these are the costs between them or the cost differences between them, and this is where you can find them. And then just made that publicly accessible through an app. So instantaneously, like overnight, became the most downloaded app, digital health solution in India, and they're massively scaling that into the surrounding areas now. But I think the delivery mechanisms and how people find access to healthcare still has a lot of room for innovation as well. But again, as you mentioned, how they pay for it, that should be pretty cut and dry.
Let's do some advice. So advice for entrepreneurs. Like if someone comes to you, Dave, hey, I'm all in, I'm ready to work super hard. What is a problem worth solving? How do you help someone, give someone advice about what is a problem? How to tell whether a problem that they're thinking about is actually worth solving, is actually worth dedicating what's going to feel like your entire life to doing. Even if you're only, running your startup for a few years, it feels like it's your entire life anyway. So what are the attributes of a problem worth giving your life to?
I think that varies person to person. I think that it's from person to person, it's a passion kind of a thing. What are you passionate about? Do you think about that problem in the world when you wake up? Do you think about it when you're getting into bed at night? Does it affect you personally? Has it affected you in your life? I think there are so many problems in the world that are worth solving. It just depends on your capacity to care about that problem. And do you still care about that problem when it's really hard to solve it? When 10 investors have told you no, when
only 10.
Yeah, that would be the beginning of the road there. But
yeah, exactly.
When it's still hard to solve. But I think that's the brilliant thing about entrepreneurship in general is that there's no shortage of problems. But then there's a deeper layer on once you get past, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to see if this works. I have an idea. Is how is your solution unique? And can your solution actually solve that problem? So if your intervention is successful, does that problem go away, or are you creating different problems that need solving? Is a great question that we don't stop to ask ourselves enough. And then if this service works, can the people that you're trying to help afford the problem or the solution or the intervention is also a question that people ask themselves kind of far too late in the pipeline a lot of the time. So I would say that once you have an idea for a product or service that you want to turn into a company, finding out if it works and if it works quickly is probably your best bet. So a lot of that rapid prototyping, human-centered design ideology, I think is really effective in doing this, is how can you get your product to look and feel real and in the hands of consumers as fast as possible to make sure that you have something that's worth scaling so that you aren't wasting time in the testing phase learning what you can as fast as possible.
I think that's very good advice. Well, Dave, this has been a super fun conversation. I hope we get a chance to collaborate on one or more of these problems at some point, because that feels like it would be fun and potentially high impact.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
If someone wants to find out more about Unreasonable Group or join or pick your brain or something, how do they do that?
Check us out at unreasonablegroup.com or just shoot me an email. I'm dave@unreasonablegroup.com.
Awesome. Dave Smith, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Now it's time for a listener question, and this one comes in from Sarankana via email. And Sarankana says, I would like to know if your company is in the stock market yet. I am interested in investing in your company.
It's a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah. Thank you for being interested in investing in our company. Yeah, I mean, no, we're not currently publicly listed. We hope to be at some point. I think it's, I kind of think companies, especially tech companies, have a moral obligation to try to be publicly listed because tech companies are kind of the ones that are making the future, and it's good to have the level of transparency and accountability and kind of democratization of ownership that comes with being publicly listed. So hopefully one day, but certainly not yet.
Yeah, thanks, Rankana. We appreciate that. If you have any other listener questions, you can email us at hello@all-turtles.com or tweet us at @allturtlesco. And Marie will get you. This podcast is a production of the All Turtles Worldwide Media Empire. We recorded this episode in the world-class Donatella Studios in San Francisco, California. Thanks to Dave Smith for joining us this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, send us an email to hello@all-turtles.com. Marie reads every message. Thanks to everyone who made this episode possible, including Jim Metzendorf for editing, Marie McCoy-Thompson for producing, Chris Plug for his audio expertise, Micah Rivera for our artwork, and Matt Ammerman for our theme music. On behalf of Jessica Collier, Phil Libin, and yours truly, John Cifuentes, and the rest of the All Turtles team, thanks for listening.